There is a silent struggle that many of us face. It's the relentless noise of our own minds, the constant replay of conversations, the endless what-if scenarios. We call it overthinking. We're told it's a weakness, a source of anxiety, a habit to be broken. But what if this deep, persistent contemplation, this very tendency to think too much, was not a curse, but a hidden strength? What if the ability to dive into the darkest corners of our minds was the very key to finding light? This is the story of a man who didn't just think his way out of a problem, but thought his way through the gates of hell itself. It is the story of Viktor Frankl and how his overthinking became his secret weapon, not just for survival, but for a profound discovery about the human spirit. Frankl's life wasn't a straight path to greatness. It was a journey through an unimaginable crucible. He was a man who, long before he faced the horrors of the concentration camps, was already grappling with the most profound questions of existence. He was a young doctor in Vienna, a city of intellectual ferment and deep anxiety, and in this world, he was an anomaly, a deep thinker in an age that valued quick solutions. His mind was his laboratory, his emotions his subject, and his life an ongoing experiment. We'll explore how his relentless mental processing, often seen as a liability, forged a unique form of resilience that would ultimately save him and inspire millions. If this journey into the depths of human resilience resonates with you, and you want to uncover the powerful secrets hidden within your own mind, please consider subscribing. Your support helps us continue to bring these life-changing stories to light. Now let's go back to Vienna, to the turn of the 20th century, where our story begins. The story of Viktor Frankl begins not in a prison cell, but in the crowded lecture halls and vibrant coffee houses of early 20th century Vienna. This was a city obsessed with the human mind. Freud had already laid the foundation of psychoanalysis, and Adler was challenging those very ideas. Young Viktor, a brilliant and sensitive medical student, was immersed in this intellectual whirlwind. From a very young age, he was not content with simple answers. While other boys were playing, Frankl was wrestling with existential questions, contemplating the meaning of suffering and the purpose of life. This wasn't just a hobby. It was an internal compulsion. He couldn't help but overthink everything. He devoured philosophical texts, wrote articles for scientific journals while still in high school, and engaged in passionate debates with his peers. This wasn't the manic, anxious overthinking we associate with modern life, but rather a deep, deliberate form of contemplation. It was a rigorous search for truth, a desperate need to understand the complex machinery of human existence, a mental habit that would soon prove to be his greatest asset. He was building his mental armor, piece by piece, without even knowing it.
As Frankl matured, his contemplative nature began to shape his professional path. He was not just a student of the mind, but a doctor dedicated to healing it. He saw the prevailing psychoanalytic theories of his time as incomplete. Where Freud saw the will to pleasure and Adler the will to power, Frankl saw something deeper, a fundamental human drive that he termed the will to meaning. This was his central hypothesis, a radical idea born from years of introspective thought and observation. He believed that the primary motivation in human life was not to avoid pain or seek pleasure, but to find a reason to live, a purpose for one's existence. But as the 1930s drew to a close, this abstract intellectual pursuit was about to collide with a brutal, unimaginable reality. The political climate in Austria was turning sinister. The rise of Nazism was not just a historical event for Frankl, it was a personal threat, a shadow that grew darker with each passing day. He was a Jew in a city that was rapidly becoming hostile, and his thoughtful, analytical mind, which had once been a source of intellectual fulfillment, now became a survival mechanism. He was forced to overthink not just the meaning of life, but the very real and present danger to his own. Every decision, every conversation, every glance from a stranger was filtered through a new lens of calculated risk and potential peril. He was about to be thrust into a world where his theories would be tested, not in a textbook, but in the crucible of human suffering.
The world was closing in, and with it, the ultimate test of Frankl's will to meaning. In 1942, the shadows he had long observed became his reality. He, his wife, and his parents were deported to the Theresienstadt ghetto. The intellectual sanctuary of Vienna was replaced by the brutal, dehumanizing reality of a concentration camp. Here, Frankl's overthinking took on a new, desperate form. It was no longer about abstract philosophy, but about the minute-by-minute calculations of survival. He observed his fellow prisoners not just as a doctor, but as a scientist of the human spirit. He saw those who gave up, who lost their will to live, and he saw those who, against all odds, found a reason to persevere. In this hellish environment, the very act of thinking became an act of defiance. He mentally reconstructed his manuscript, The Doctor and the Soul, which had been confiscated. This wasn't an academic exercise, it was a lifeline. By focusing his mind on this task, he created an inner world that the Nazis could not touch. He imagined himself giving lectures about his experiences after the war, transforming his present suffering into a future purpose. This was the ultimate application of his theory, finding meaning not in spite of suffering, but through it. It was here, in the darkest of places, that the overthinker found his most powerful tool.
The hell of Theresienstadt was but a prelude. Frankl's journey took a darker turn with his transfer to Auschwitz, a name that has become synonymous with absolute despair. Here, the last vestiges of a civilized world were stripped away. His name was replaced by a number, his clothes by a striped uniform. His very identity, everything he had built his life on, was extinguished. This was the final, brutal laboratory for his theories. In this place of industrialized death, Frankl observed his fellow prisoners with a chilling clarity. He saw that the difference between those who lived and those who died was often not physical strength, but something far more profound. It was a choice, a decision to hold on to a reason for living. In the face of unimaginable suffering, he realized that the last of the human freedoms, the one thing no one could ever take from you, was the ability to choose your attitude in any given circumstance. Amidst the constant specter of death, his overthinking became a tool of radical self-preservation. He would find meaning in the smallest things, a brief, shared moment of compassion with another prisoner, the breathtaking beauty of a sunset seen through a fence, or, most powerfully, in the vivid image of his wife, Tilly. By focusing on these mental images, he transformed his inner world into an unbreakable sanctuary. He was not just surviving, he was living a purpose. He was proving, in the most horrific conditions imaginable, that even when you have nothing left to lose, you can still choose what your suffering means.
The day of liberation came, but it was not the joyous moment one might imagine. For Frankl, freedom was accompanied by the crushing weight of a terrible truth. He learned that his wife, his parents, and his brother had all perished in the camps. The purpose he had clung to, reuniting with his family, was gone. The overthinker was now a survivor, grappling with an immense, unfillable void. He was a man out of time, a ghost carrying the memories of a world that no longer existed, returning to a Vienna that was both familiar and utterly alien. But even in this profound emptiness, his purpose was not extinguished. The suffering had to mean something. It could not have been for nothing. This desperate need to find purpose in the face of such senseless loss drove him. In an intense period of just 9 days, he dictated the manuscript that would become his most famous work, Man's Search for Meaning. This was not just a book, it was a psychological and spiritual testament. It was the distillation of his overthinking in the camps, the proof that the ultimate human freedom is to choose one's attitude, to find meaning even in the most despairing circumstances. He had taken the darkest parts of his overthinking and forged them into a beacon of hope for all of humanity.
The publication of Man's Search for Meaning was not just a literary event, it was a global phenomenon. Frankl's raw, unsparing account of his time in the camps, coupled with his revolutionary philosophy, spoke to a generation grappling with the anxieties of the post-war world. His book, translated into dozens of languages, became a lifeline for millions. Suddenly, the deep, persistent overthinking that had saved him in Auschwitz was providing a roadmap for others to find their own purpose. He became a professor, a respected lecturer, and a figure of immense moral authority. He spent the rest of his life teaching the core principles of his philosophy, logotherapy. At its heart were 3 pillars: the freedom of will, the will to meaning, and the meaning of life. He taught that we are not merely products of our environment or our genetics. We possess the freedom to choose our response to any given situation. He argued that the quest for meaning is the primary motivation in human life, and that meaning can be found not just in success or joy, but in suffering itself. He showed a world obsessed with fleeting pleasures and external validation that true fulfillment came from within, from the conscious decision to find a purpose, a cause, a person to love. His overthinking had evolved into a legacy that gave others the tools to navigate their own struggles and find a deeper sense of self.
And so, we return to the question we began with. Could overthinking be a secret weapon? The life of Viktor Frankl offers a resounding yes. His journey from a contemplative young doctor in Vienna to a survivor who found meaning in the abyss is a testament to this truth. His deep, persistent contemplation was never a weakness. It was the very engine of his resilience, a tool that allowed him to build an inner world so powerful that no external horror could ever shatter it. He didn't just endure his suffering, he transformed it into a purpose. And in doing so, he gave us all a gift. Frankl's lesson is not just about surviving a catastrophe. It's about navigating the small daily anxieties of our own lives. It's the profound realization that our overthinking, that constant internal dialogue, can be a compass. It can be the force that pushes us to look deeper, to find a reason, to discover a meaning that makes our struggles not just bearable, but purposeful. You, like Frankl, have the power to choose your attitude. You have the freedom to find meaning in your own suffering. You can take that noise in your head and turn it into a source of strength, a tool for resilience, and a guide for a life of purpose. If Frankl's incredible story has inspired you to re-examine your own life and find purpose in your struggles, please like this video. Share it with someone who needs to hear this message. Subscribe to Frankl's Insight and hit the notification bell so you don't miss our next deep dive into the human spirit. Thank you for watching.